Good morning, everybody. Richard Solomon taking care of business. How you doing out there? We have another action-packed show. In fact, this one is going to appeal to your financial interests, so stay tuned. You should know that we have a YouTube channel, and we're beginning to post all of our stuff on YouTube. We started with the Jeff Mattson interviews from Dark Star Orchestra. We have the 2 hours of My Father's Place. We have the interview with Cousin Brucey. And we expect to roll out more soon. I have Michael Stango with me in the studio, my production assistant, and he has been doing a stellar job. So thank you, Michael. And he takes care of both audio and visual needs of the show. And as we expand our base, we'll probably need even a bigger staff. So all that's good. So check us out. We're now on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. So in not even 8 years, we're getting up to the 21st century. Today, I have the great privilege of having Susan Nash here. Now, you need to know Susan Nash. Now, I already know her, but you need to know her. First of all, she is an incredible author. She is an incredibly intelligent and smart CPA. And she has a book that you must have. Yes, that's right. You must have. It's called Skip Tracing, Basics and Beyond. Now, skip tracing is finding people. And the reason why you want to find them is to pull the money out of their wallets when you have a judgment against them. Now, considering that I wrote a book called Winning in the New York Small Claims Courts, a simple step-by-step guide for everyone, and wrote that book, in 2002, this is actually the perfect companion to the book because it's sort of like, all right, I won, and now what? And I kind of answered that question in maybe 4 pages. Susan, on the other hand, answers that in about 400 pages. And she does this in a thorough, methodical way, in a nationwide book. And I mean, and this is the second edition. Now, I happen to know the first edition because I've read that cover to cover. But as laws change and evolve, we need to keep up with things. Sadly, the Winning in New York Small Claims Court book has not been updated yet. So I need to get on the bandwagon. But one of the coolest things about this book is on the back cover, it says, as featured on Taking Care of Business on WCWP.org, 88.1 FM, and tcbradio.com, Brookville, Long Island. So I'm most appreciative, and any book that says that has to be good. So there we go. So first of all, welcome back to the show, because Susan has been a guest when she had book number 1 out there. So welcome back to the show, and I'm really glad that you're here. I guess you had so much to talk about. Tell me, what's new and exciting in this book?
Well, thanks, Rich, for having me again. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be interviewed by you, of all people, my colleague and friend. And the reason why I wrote the second edition is because everybody liked the first book so much, and so much has changed in the last 4 years that I decided an update was mandatory. There's so many new websites and so many new chapters. There's chapters on fraud, there's chapters on flipping, there's chapters on cyber tracking and advanced cyber tracking, and there's so much to get into that it's almost like a brand new book. It's chock full of little gold nuggets. It has a skip tracing checklist inside so that you can actually print it out and keep it on your desktop. And anytime you have a case, you can tick things off as you go along. It's really a priceless utility.
I'm going to have to do that. Let me tell you, I have a stack of work out there that needs to be processed, and I'm going to make sure this book is literally on the right side of my desk. Now, just so people know, because I want to make sure that this is right out there. If people don't want to read the book because they just would rather have the expert do it, you do that too.
Yes, we do.
Cool.
I do. Actually, I also have the book on audible.com, and you can listen to it, especially for all of the private investigators and the lawyers that are in court waiting for their case to be called. You can put your headset on and you can listen to it, turn it on and off at your pleasure.
See, there you go. In most courthouses, they don't let you use electronic devices, so I guess you have to do that in the hallway.
Oh, no.
But anyway, let me give out some very important information. First of all, if you would like to call Susan, her number is 212-447-5913. That is a number you must have in your cell phone. It must be in your computer in whatever the database that you use for phone numbers. And you need to have her email. And it's susan@searchnetmgt.com. And of course, her website is searchnetmgt.com. And I can tell you from my own personal experience, it's hard to do this alone. The books are a great resource, but there's sometimes when it's just like the nitty gritty. Sometimes you need an expert to kind of get you to the last 5 blocks of the marathon. You may be able to get most of it there, but sometimes you really need someone to pull you to the finish line and, of course, douse you with water and help revive you. So let's talk first about skip trace. What is skip tracing and why is it so important, especially because they don't deliver the phone books on people's doorsteps anymore?
That's very true, Rich. And skip tracing is the art of finding information about somebody that doesn't want to be found.
Right. And I assume because the economy has gotten worse in the last 4 years, that there are more people who don't want to be found.
That's absolutely true. Their numbers are growing because in hard economic times, as we're going through now, people turn over their jobs and their assets more quickly. So people get fired and people find new jobs. What I am finding, though, is that the economy is starting to turn around. For many years now, I saw people that did not have jobs, that could not find jobs, that were on extended unemployment. But now, for the first time in a very long time, for the last couple of months, since before the new year, I found that people are getting rehired with new jobs. So that's a very good sign. It's a great sign for the economy, and it's an even better sign for the skip tracers because all over again we have assets to locate.
Let's do this. When people owe money, most of the time they don't come forward, and it's up to the lawyers and the creditors to go grab them. So what do people do to find you, and what do you do to help them?
Well, basically what happens is that most of the time people say, oh, I have no assets, I'm broke, I have no money, I don't have a job, I have nothing. And the reality of the situation is that that's not always true, because even the people that don't have jobs and even the people that aren't working, they did at one time have a 401k, or they did have a pension, or they did have some kind of little savings account. So that's not necessarily true. And what happens is that people get judgments, and after they get judgments, they can't collect them. So the attorneys or the creditors, they need somebody to help them locate the assets. And that's where we come in. We are the people behind the scenes that locate the assets where nobody else can find them.
There's really not a lot of people who do what you do that I seem to be aware of. Why is that? Because there is an overwhelming need for what you do. And I would imagine literally ads galore in legal newspapers, in seminars to the lawyers. You're almost like the only person I know who really does it, in any way. Why? Well, I mean, I'm glad you do that, and I don't want to encourage competition, but I mean, people I think are just relying upon databases, but as you said before, it's an art, it's not a science.
Absolutely. It's an art, and it has to do with psychology, and it has to do with relationships, and it has to do with likes and dislikes. Some people like vanilla and some people like chocolate. Some people are allergic to chocolate. Some people only like vanilla if it's Haagen-Dazs, but if it's Breyers, they like strawberry. So it's a personal preference. And what happens is that in my case, the competition, which are usually private investigators, they stick to the tried and true methods that they know, which is to investigate.
Following people. Taking photographs.
Surveillance, going through trash, following them, taking pictures, surveillance. But I am not in the field type of a person. I'm an in-house research type of person, and my methodology is to follow the money as opposed to follow the person.
Oh my God, Watergate. Because okay, now everybody remember now, I'm going to say Deep Throat, but that's not the movie. This was Mark, I think it was Mark Fell. Yeah, it was finally released just before I think he passed away or something like that. But there was, he was the informant to the reporters Woodward and Bernstein, and I think he would do something like, if he wanted to have a meeting, he would put a plant in a certain part of his balcony, or they would have a paper delivered with something. I remember seeing about this. But anyway, follow the money. Yeah, exactly. How do you follow? Where do you start? Okay, I got a judgment, all right? And I don't know what to do. I went to small claims court. I won. I got a piece of paper, and I call up the guy, and I go, all right, I won. And the guy goes, and he hangs up on you. And then now what? What do you do?
Well, basically,
buy your book, obviously.
Obviously, they buy the book, and I've had a lot of people that told me that they don't need my services because I told them exactly how to do it in the how-to guide, and they figure it out. But what happens is, once again, it has to do with personal preferences. I'm going to tell you very briefly about a case that I'm involved in my life, and it has to do
I love real stories.
My girlfriend's parents, who are 88 and 90, and they live in the next town over from here. And basically, at this point of their life, they're incompetent. They had a beautiful little house right down the block, and because they're incompetent and they're not well mentally, they stopped paying their taxes. Now, you're going to say, how could you do that? Her father was a lawyer and an accountant. How could you be so negligent?
Well, because advanced age.
Exactly.
It happens.
So what happened was they were evicted from their house last week.
Oh, wow.
And marshals came, took everything out, put it in storage, and here's two very elderly people that are not well and have a ton of judgments against them. They lost their house because the taxes were sold off to a tax lien investor, and now in order to get the house back, the investor wants $400,000, of which they only paid $21,000 in 1960 when they bought the house, so it makes no sense whatsoever. So what's the million-dollar question? Do they have any money? Are there any funds? Clearly, there were tons of funds. The only problem is nobody knew where they were because they were incompetent. So here comes the little skip tracer looking for the assets, and sure enough, based on what I knew about them, which was that one was an attorney and a CPA, and the mother was a New York City school teacher, I knew that combined they had in excess of $100,000 a year in pension income. And how did I find that out? Well, that's public record. So there's no mystery there. There's certain websites where you could plug in a person's name and see what they get and what they don't get. Once I knew that they had the money, it was relatively simple to trace when they get the money. How do they get the money? Are they getting a direct deposit? Are they getting electronic funds transfer? Are they getting a wire transfer? Are they getting a paper check and depositing it into the account? So basically, you have to wait for a little bit of time for the week to come, and you have to search to see where is that money going. And we found exactly where the money was going to. It was going to several accounts, one of which was Smith Barney, another one was Dreyfus, and at Chase Manhattan Bank. So we found all their assets. Now we know they have assets, and they do have assets to buy the house back, but we feel they're incompetent and they really cannot handle it on their own.
Wow. You are listening to Taking Care of Business, broadcasted on 88.1 FM in Brookville, New York. I am your host, Richard Solomon. Thank you for being a part of my radio family. Today, part of my radio family includes Susan Nash, the author of Skip Tracing Basics and Beyond. And let me tell you, you want the beyond part more than just the basics. And I have Michael here, my co-production assistant, who is helping me put together YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and all these other cool things that will help enhance our show. If you want to send us an email about either this show or other shows, you can contact us at tcbradio, WCWP, @yahoo.com. And, of course, you can always call us at the station, which many of you do. And those calls are always welcome. So, keep the calls coming. I don't care if you contact us by fax, email, or carrier pigeon. We welcome that. And we've actually found a lot of great and interesting guests and topics from our audience. So anyway, if you want to get in touch with Susan, who's here today, Susan at searchnetmgt.com. That's an important email. I actually use that all the time. And her number is 212-447-5913. Her book, Skip Tracing Basics and Beyond, is published by iUniverse, and it has availability at all the usual places: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, and all that other good stuff. And, of course, Audible in case you're at the beach. Now, speaking of the Internet, what does the Internet do for you, and what does the Internet not do for you as far as finding people's assets? I know that there's a tension between we want information, but we want our privacy, and we can't have it both ways. Either your life is on the Internet or your life's not on the Internet. But how does that work, at least from your perspective?
Well, Rich, we all have what's called a cyber footprint.
I keep trying to erase mine.
And basically, the cyber footprint is what you leave on the Internet. Some people are very secretive about what they put on the Internet, and you can't find anything, and other people are an open book. For example, look at people's Facebook pages.
I'm horrified. They give their birth dates, who they're married to, their anniversary. I mean, they basically, you click on the little profile, and you see, everything.
Absolutely. We just had a case last week for one of our attorneys in the South, and he needed to verify where the paralegal worked because he thought that it wasn't true. He thought that she was scamming him. So sure enough, I went into Facebook and LinkedIn, and she had her entire profile going back to the early 90s, which I was able to call every single solitary company and verify the dates of employment. They were all accurate except for one company that had gone out of business. So it's really very simple to protect yourself if you don't want the information on the Internet. All you have to do is change your privacy settings to private or your friends only. If you're the kind of person who is transparent, which is what the norm is nowadays, corporations, countries, people are becoming more transparent than ever, and it's the people that are transparent that get the biggest rewards, because when you expose everything about yourself, there's nothing to hide, and that's what people like. People don't like to have to dig and say, oh, is he this, is he that? It's better if you just say, I worked here from this day to this day, and I left because I had a job offer and they doubled my salary. So transparency really is the key, along with innovation. And websites like Facebook, believe it or not, you can actually see divorce filings on Facebook nowadays.
How's that?
People say things like, my husband was served last night at the topless bar. So then the opposing attorney comes into court and says, well, she put on Facebook that he was served last night at the topless bar. The only problem was that he was in New York City at a chapter meeting, so he wasn't there. And Facebook, believe it or not, is on more than 50% of all divorce filings. The word Facebook.
Wow. Now, I'll tell you an interesting story. In one of my cases, I was pursuing someone who I claimed was aiding and abetting a debtor. And I used that person's Facebook vacation, fabulous vacation photos in this exotic place and that exotic place, and attached them to motion papers and said, the reason why these people are able to afford all these fabulous vacations is because of the money that they owe us, because they obviously used it for these purposes as opposed to paying their bills. And we actually were successful. Now, I did this a number of years ago beforehand, but just a little note for attorneys out there. There is an ethical rule that you cannot friend anybody on Facebook for the purposes of trying to get information from them. You can only use what's basically publicly available. So you have to be very careful. It's an ethical rule that's out there, so
yes,
be careful.
That is 100% correct, and it's not an ethical rule anymore. It has, or it is
it's an attorney ethics rule,
law.
Right,
where Facebook and the other social media sites are a great place to skip trace. It's probably one of the best places in this day and age, but you're not allowed to collect. You're not allowed to tell them that they owe you money and you're a collector and you're looking for assets. But you can look at their public profile and make deductions. It's also one of the best places in the world when people are looking to serve somebody. The best
you get to see a picture.
You get to see a picture so you know who you're looking for, and we always try to include that in our reports. But the best thing is that if you look up their IP address, you can tell where they are by the range. In other words, you'll know whether they're in New York City or whether they're in Long Island or whether they're in Florida. And that's very important if you have to narrow it down. So Facebook is actually used for service nowadays also.
Wow. Let me switch gears for 1 second. I'm sure that there are plenty of people out there who are searching their family history that want to find people to figure out family trees, just to know what the ancestry was like. Maybe they want to, for estate purposes, find out who heirs are. I know that when people, as a lawyer, I know like when people pass away, sometimes if there's no will, you have to find out maybe who could have inherited. I know that sometimes if people are cut out of a will, then you have to notify the people who the cutoutees need to be notified, just so they can go to court and have an opportunity to be heard as to why they were cut out, and I guess maybe challenge the will or whatever it is. It does get a little wacky because, all kinds of people who you may not have even seen or heard of from 30 years have or all of a sudden given the right to come up out of the woodwork, but that's the law. Or at least it's the law in some jurisdictions. How does skip tracing work in terms of finding ancestors, maybe people who lived in the 1800s when there was no internet, there's no cyber footprint, but they're still relevant, and then we need to go back in order to find their, we have to go back, say, to somebody's great-grandfather was born in the 1880s. And now you look forward and you need to find their descendants who are alive today. And they could be all over the place. They could be scattered, and you're not necessarily sure. And then, of course, people may have changed their names because of marriage. How does all that work?
Well, there's great websites that are both private and proprietary that you have to subscribe to that give you great information. It gives you family members and relatives. So that would be one great starting point. There's also public databases that are free on the internet, like ancestry.com or SSDI, which is Social Security Death Index. Those are also priceless. They give you the dates, the full Social Security number, and they're free. So those are two alternate sides of the rainbow for you to start with. And of course, there's places like Facebook and LinkedIn and the other social media sites. And a lot of these people, after they pass, they actually do open or start or create a new page for them. So people like Albert Einstein and Marilyn Monroe have their own Facebook page for fans.
Is that, wow. Now that's got to be interesting to have a Facebook page and have died before the internet was even created.
Well, of course, the estates still take in millions of dollars a year, so...
Oh yeah, there are certain celebrities who have tremendous afterlife value. I'm sure Elvis Presley and the Presley estate, Marilyn Monroe. I know Albert Einstein I think he bequeathed everything to Hebrew University or something like that in Jerusalem. Who else? I don't know. But
I think that those are the three biggest.
Is that right?
Elvis, Marilyn, and Albert Einstein
Wow.
are the three biggest.
So if you're trying to do some genealogy beyond sort of SSDI and Ancestry.com and some of the other, I guess, MyHeritage.com, so what else could you look for?
Well, as far as the public information goes, that's pretty much all of it. And from that point on, then you need to contact an expert like myself, because we have our own proprietary database and we have our own applications that we use. So those are things that you would have to pay for. They're not readily available on the internet.
Right. Are there some databases out there that are only like subscribed to for people in certain industries like law enforcement?
Yes, absolutely.
Lawyers, forensic people like yourself?
Absolutely. If you take a database like LexisNexis, which is one of the best and the finest, they have different database programs. Even though the information is all basically the same, they have different information for different people. For example, a private investigator that's working on a homicide case will need very different information than a collector or somebody that's looking for on a probate case, or they're looking for people that are deceased. So each database breaks the information down further into what you need. For example, if you are a collector, you're going to need, for example, the Social Security number. But if you're looking for your deceased great-grandfather, then the Social Security is not as important as the date of birth and the date of death and who the other family members are. So the databases program everything especially geared toward the industry.
So I have to ask a logical question. Supposedly your Social Security number is like a private piece of information, yet everybody on earth asks for it. And yet it should be private, and yet if I want to go on to some of these databases, like let's say I'm like a forensic accountant like yourself, you can actually get the Social Security numbers?
No, you can no longer get the Social Security numbers the way you were able to do so 4 or 5 years ago. Due to privacy concerns, all databases have truncated the Social Security numbers, whether it's the last 4 digits or the first 5. Social Security numbers are no longer exposed for any purpose. Even when you're doing an employment verification, they will no longer let you put the full social. They'll only ask either for the first 5 or the last 4.
But how did these databases actually get this information to begin with? That's a really interesting, because do they get it from like the health insurance people or
No, if you think about it, all of this information is really public, and we cannot opt out. It's kind of like if you're on the internet, you have an internet footprint.
No, but I'm talking about let's say my Social Security number, right?
You can't really opt out. The reason why is because when you're born, a Social Security number is issued for you. You will need that Social Security number for insurance, for a driver's license in many states, if you go to the doctor, to go to school, to get married, to get divorced. There's a million reasons.
Right, but who in that chain of custody is leaking the information if I'm not doing it?
It's not a matter of the information being leaked. It's a matter of the information being on deposit. It's the same thing like books. Google Books now is taking all of the books and they're scanning them in, and all of the books will be on a computer server for eternity. So the data providers, the people, humanity scans the information in, and once the information is in, you can't remove it.
Right, and of course, one thing I've learned is that most of the time people's judgments always seem to get into the databases, but the satisfaction or the paying of the judgments and removing them doesn't seem to get out there as well, because I see a lot of people who come to me as a lawyer and say, look, I paid this and it's still showing up. And I'll actually have to do things to take people's judgments off.
That's very true. A lot of times the satisfaction of judgments are not filed either correctly or in a timely fashion, or I'm not sure why, but a lot of times that does happen.
Well, my opinion is that I don't think that there's value in the satisfaction, so that people don't care to research that, whereas there's a lot of value in the judgment information, so the resources are put to find that, but not necessarily find the cure.
Exactly. And also, Rich, there are many states where if you file any type of public record, for example, a bankruptcy filing, you must include your full Social Security number. There are certain states, like Texas, for example, where your Social Security number is a part of your driver's license. Wow. So unless they change that particular law at the state level, Social Security numbers will still be available.
You are listening to Taking Care of Business, being broadcast to you from the Abrams Communications Studio 3 at 88.1 FM WCWP. You can catch us at wcwp.org, and you can click on the 88.1 Listen Live button. You can catch us at tcbradio.com. We have a little Listen Live button there, too. If you've missed the show, we may be posting our shows on YouTube. We definitely have some podcast sites, so check our website to see what we have. And, of course, we have a Facebook page. We have Twitter announcements, and, of course, all the other good social media. So we have some great stuff out there, especially if you love rock and roll. I think the interviews with the Dark Star Orchestra's Jeff Madsen, I think the 2 hours that we did with My Father's Place was just unbelievable. And, of course, the Bronx Wanderers, great band, and great inside stories. And lots of other great stuff, too, to look forward to as we continually post. I'm amazed at the number of resources you have in your book. It must have taken you the 4 years just to assemble it. One thing that I thought that was kind of interesting is when you talk about archive.org, which is sort of something that's not really well known yet. Talk about that if you don't mind.
Well, archive.org is a very valuable website, and the reason it's so valuable is because we always think that when we put things up on the internet, after we change them or take them down, it's no longer there. Well, that is the biggest fallacy of the internet. Archive is a website where you can go, you can put in the domain name, like searchnetmgt.com, and it will tell you all of the times and the dates that the website was changed. And it will actually show you with an asterisk what the website was like before. Now, that information, you're going to say to me, belongs to me. It was my website. I changed it on such and such date. Why does Archive still have it, and why are they still showing it? Well, believe it or not, the internet believes that that information is theirs. It's not really mine. The same thing holds true for your telephone records. The same thing holds true for your email. You think that your email is private on AOL or Yahoo or whoever else you use? Wrong.
Talk about that, because people don't really understand that.
That information can be subpoenaed. Once you have mail on Yahoo, that mail stays on their server forever. It eventually goes into storage, which they can access. So if you're going through a nasty divorce and one of the spouses says, oh, he did this on such and such date, you can actually subpoena Yahoo and get the emails, and they have to comply. So as far as I'm concerned, and as far as they're concerned, you are not the owner of your email. Once it goes on the server, they can access it.
So a tip out there, when on Facebook where you check in, don't check in at the nudie bar.
And here's another tip, Rich. If you think about General Petraeus and the love affair, the reason why he got caught was because of the email. Now, they were being super cautious by not checking their email, but they didn't, because they weren't sending the email, so they thought the email couldn't be subpoenaed.
Right. Didn't they do as like drafts or something, but not hit this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They didn't send the emails, and that's how they got caught, because the emails were sitting on the server, and when they subpoenaed the records, everything came up, not only the sent and received email in the inbox, but also the drafts that were saved. So you have to be very careful, because once again, we all have a cyber footprint, and it never goes away.
Well, speaking of never going away, I'm looking at page 214 here. And you have some really interesting thing called criminal records. So apparently, the Federal Bureau of Prisons has a website, bop.gov. There is a criminalsearches.com. One of my favorites, myinmatelocator.com, mugshots.com, bustedmugshots.com, inmate-search.org, and all this other really. So could you talk about some of these websites in general?
Yes. The reason why these are such great websites is, number one, because they give you a picture of your subject. So if you're looking to serve them, you know exactly what they look like. It also gives you their date of birth. It gives you the dates of incarceration or the date that they were booked. And in many cases, it gives you a little brief of the case. Rich was driving drunk and turned left and ran into somebody else's car. So it's all there.
Not this Rich.
Never this Rich. But
yeah,
these are wonderful websites, and the way that the information is obtained from these websites is bookings are public information. Arrest records is public information. So when an arrest is made, a record is generated. It's considered a public record, and because it is a public record, it goes into a database, and it's there for eternity.
I'm looking here. You have invaluable information. There's something called mersync.org, the Mortgage Electronic Registration System.
Yes.
I never heard of that. And see, that's why I need a resource like this. That's got to be the motherlode of. Tell me about this one.
Well, that one, like you said, is the motherlode of information. And the reason is because that is where they physically house the mortgage application. And as you know, when you apply for a mortgage, they want to know everything and everything about you, your social security number, your job, your prior jobs, your credit report, and all of that has been scanned in and is also kept on file. It has your bank account information, it has your salary, it has your income, it has the source of income, it has all your pensions, your 401s, and any other mutual funds and brokerages or stocks and bonds that you may have. So if you can get your hands on a mortgage application, that basically has everything that you need in one document.
Wow. I notice also you have a lot of things to check people's licenses, the broker's license, real estate, notary. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, when people are given the right to practice a profession, they are licensed by their state. There's two ways to be licensed. One is through the Department of State, and the other one is through the Department of Education. A lawyer, for example, or an accountant, which is licensed by his state, you would have to check that with the Department of Education. On the other hand, there are other professions like real estate licenses, private investigators, security guards, appraisers, real estate agents, and those are licensed not by the Department of Education, but by the Department of State. In many cases, the reason for that is because those people are a source of revenue in taxes to the state. So they're monitored by two entirely different agencies.
Now, speaking of which, real estate records, I think there's a lot of real estate in certain jurisdictions. Real estate records are online. Who owns them? What the address is? I assume things like property value,
Yes.
deed, liens. Talk about that.
And it's
That's got to
all
be
free. There's the best sites, in my opinion, that I like the best, that I use, and of course it depends by area, is streeteasy.com, Trulia.com, and Zillow.com.
Could you spell the last two?
Trulia is Trulia,
Okay.
and Zillow is Zillow.
Okay. Now,
.com.
what do those last two do?
Well, all three of them give you you can look up by address, and it'll tell you who owns the property, how much the property is, when was it last sold, and all of the other variables about the town, the taxes, the school district.
Wow.
So
And are those free?
everything, and it's all free.
Wow. I notice here, birthdatabase.com. That's unbelievable. So you could actually find people's birth dates that way?
You can, but it's not 100%. A lot of times they get it a little bit mixed up, but for a free service, you can't go wrong.
Wow. Wow. That's pretty interesting. Namechk.com.
Yes, namecheck.com, and that is to check a name when you want to verify if the name is actually the right name. A lot of times what debtors do is they change the spelling of their name.
I've seen that 100 times,
right.
yeah.
For example, Solomon, they'll spell S-A-L. So what you want to do is, in this site, namecheck.com, you could put the name in and the town, and it'll give you if the name is correct. What happens is a lot of times they'll come up with a Y instead of an I or an O instead of an A. So it's a very valuable website.
Someone told me, and I don't know if this is true or not, but those supermarket loyalty cards? Someone told me that's a lot of that information is then sold to different databases. So,
That's exactly
where, yeah.
correct.
And all of that, but they're tracking what you eat. So theoretically, the insurance companies can come in and say, well, you eat a lot of salt.
Actually, the information is not resold to businesses like that. It's actually sold for marketing purposes to target you to buy something. So if they see that you bought salt, then they're going to show you kosher sea salt, Morton's,
Pepper.
Diamond. They're going to show you other things. And that's very true. They do that. They also do it online by tracking you with cookies. So if you visit a regular website, you'll notice that it loads immediately. That's because they have installed a cookie on your server and they know it's you.
Talk about that. How do people track your searches? And I know, like, I've heard that, like, your searches are all recorded.
Yes.
So,
Everyone.
now, I know that there's some good in that. Let's say, for example, everybody is searching for flu remedies, and they notice that there's an epidemic going east to west because the searches are moving in a certain pattern. So I understand that. But I guess, let's say you're just looking for, like, how to write a bad check, something like that. That could be used against you.
Absolutely. And I just recently saw an interview with Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google, who went to Korea in order to start up Google in North Korea.
North Korea?
In North Korea, to open the market up.
I didn't think they even had the internet. Let them have internet there.
Right? Surprise, surprise. And one of the things that he said was exactly that whatever you search for is online, indeterminate, forever. Forever it stays.
Right. So obviously in North Korea, rioting against the government is not a good search.
I guess, they want to let people search for whatever they want. And China also, they're opening up.
Wow. What are some of the good resources in New York State? I know that there's nycourts.gov is the court website. I know that the Secretary of State is dos.ny.gov or something like that.
Now that we have our new Governor Cuomo, he's updated all of the state websites and he's made it much more user-friendly than ever before. It's much nicer to use. It's easier, it's faster, and it's not down as much. So that makes it very valuable.
I'm looking at something here that's very interesting. You have a chapter called Tracking Social Security Numbers, and apparently, I didn't know this until just now, but the first 3 digits of your Social Security number tell you what state it was issued in.
Right.
Wow. That's actually fascinating.
That is very fascinating because one thing about human nature, and like I said, skip tracing is all about relationships and psychology. One thing that I've learned is that life never turns out the way we planned. But in addition to that, we always go back to our comfort zone and what's familiar and what we know, which is usually where we were born or raised or grew up. So if you know that a person was born in New York, in Long Island, but they went out to Los Angeles, eventually they'll come back to New York to visit their family, and they may even come and stay. So always go back and look at the place of origin because a lot of times they're hiding there.
You are listening to a very fast hour of radio. This is Richard Solomon on 88.1 FM, WCWP, WCWP.org. We are broadcasting you from Brookville, New York. Thank you for being a part of our show and listening and being a part of my radio family. We are 3/4 away done. We're talking about finding people both for good purposes like family reunions and family history, and finding them for not so great reasons because they owe you money and you need to track them down and get their money. I'm here with Susan Nash. She's the author of Skip Tracing Basics and Beyond, and I'll tell you, the beyond part is the more important thing. A complete step-by-step guide for locating hidden assets, but it's more than that. It's about finding people. It's about using internet resources. It really is much more expansive. It's not limited to just New York. It's really a nationwide book. It's just a valuable resource, whether you are in the family history, hobby business, whether you're in the law or an accounting business, and certainly if you're in the collection and employment, you certainly want to have a lot of these resources. What could you tell me? Oh, by the way, it's 212-447-5913 and Susan at searchnetmgt.com if you want to give her a call. Our email is tcbradio, wcwp@yahoo.com, where they keep apparently all my emails long after I'm gone. What have you learned about the psychology of debtors? I mean, I have my own experiences too, but please share me with yours.
You know, I find that you always hear from the debtor that they're broke, they don't have the money.
I got nothing.
I got nothing. That's why they took my house at 90 years old and evicted me. But the reality is that there was over $500,000 in assets just sitting at the bank doing absolutely nothing. So what you hear is not always the truth. I find more and more that the debtors are becoming so sophisticated, even too sophisticated, because they actually premeditate what they're going to do. And there are websites that you can actually go in and plug the variables in to see, you know, what the ramifications are of a certain credit act. And these debtors, of course, are aware of it also. And a lot of times I find that assets are hidden.
Well, also, I've noticed that more debtors than ever have lawyered up before and after the debt is accrued. It's also, I think the laws are fairly gentle to debtors. And that, I think, is a great big shock to creditors.
That is very true. And the other thing that I'm noticing is that these debtors come in very prepared in advance. They know exactly what they're going to do. They'll bankrupt the business. They'll shut the business down for 3 months. And 3 months later, they'll open up with a name that's very similar to it. Same thing with the bank account. They know exactly what they're doing. And it's not true in many cases that they don't have assets. What's true is that they're hiding the assets from the debtor. And the other thing that I've noticed is, like you said, they're lawyering up. I call these litigious consumers because what they do is, since they're setting you up because they know if they don't pay their bill, you're going to call them and try to collect, they're going to say, oh, you can't call me after 9 o'clock. You called me at 9:01. Or, oh, you called me on my cell phone. But you don't have a landline. The only way I can call you is on your cell phone. So these are people that are very, very sophisticated debtors, know the law very well, and are actually looking to take advantage and in many cases turn the suit around and sue the collectors.
For fun and profit.
Yes.
Wow. For the people out there who are a little shy but need this information, what should you tell them through this radio show? You know, they're a little intimidated. They got the judgment. It's like, wow, what do I do? I'm not getting any cooperation. What words of encouragement do you have for them?
Well, I can always say that, first of all, we're there to help you. If you need us, we're there for you. The book has great resources. In many cases, people buy it and they're able to solve the case on their own. If you can't because your debtor is too sophisticated, we're there for you and we'll help you through it. And we'll hold your hand every step of the way.
Okay. What is the most surprising thing that you learned between the first edition and the second edition in either writing the book or about debt or about the resources? What struck you as like, wow, like when you're assembling all this stuff, was there a synthesis moment? You're like, wow, that's kind of interesting.
You know, the one thing that struck me is you cannot walk over water the same place twice because the water changes. It's constantly changing. The internet changes every second. When you go to Facebook, you see one story, and if you stay on for just a couple of minutes, you'll see another 10 stories. Nothing stays the same because it's such a fluid medium. It's moving so fast at such a rapid pace that it's hard to keep on top of it, because we started with the big mainframe computers, and now, you know, we all have
I used to work for IBM, so yeah.
Exactly, our little gadgets and our little tablets, and they say that desktop computers in the future just won't exist, and we'll all have the Google goggles.
Well, what's interesting is, in some ways, our cell phones are a treasure trove of information about us because the GPS tells us where we've been. You can sort of sync yourself, triangulate where you've been through cell towers. You get email on the cell phone. The texts you think are private, but somebody's kept them at least somewhere. Every phone call you make is logged in and out. So I assume that if someone actually was able to get, especially now where you have the smartphones, and you can take pictures of checks and email it to your bank and pay for things in front of vending machines. I have a feeling, because I know there's a drive to get your cell phone to do a lot of things. In many ways, that makes you very vulnerable, because if someone actually had all the information in your cell phone, they know every single thing about you there is to know.
That's absolutely correct. And everything that's on your cell phone can be subpoenaed. Text messages, emails, pictures, GPS, phone calls. It can all be subpoenaed from your cell phone provider, not so much the internet. When you go on the internet, they can subpoena from Google or they can subpoena from Yahoo, but they can also subpoena from Verizon or AT&T. So you have to be very careful because there is no more privacy.
And nobody really appreciates that. Now, one thing I did hear, I was listening to public radio, and there was someone who said that they use DuckDuckGo as their web browser because apparently they don't accumulate your search history. Just check that out, DuckDuckGo.
They all do. They have to by law.
Really? Oh,
yes,
well.
Because they're the custodian of records, so that's what you're paying them for.
Well. All I can say is be careful what you do, or just use somebody else's computer.
Right. It's true.
It's like, so when someone says, "Hey, Rich, I need to borrow your computer for a minute," and they type it "building missiles," make sure you keep an eye on them. I did notice one happy topic, which was that you had some websites related to radio and how to find either radio shows or radio broadcasts or radio channels. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yes, because you never know who goes on the radio. A lot of people, things change in people's lives, and things run in cycles in our lives, usually 7-year cycles, but not always. So after 7 years, you may get married, you may get divorced, you may have a new child, you may have a whole bunch of children, and all of that stuff is there forever. It never goes away. It never changes. And as much as people think that they have privacy, I hate to tell you, but privacy's gone. Privacy's a thing of the past.
Well, I guess you can only have privacy if you choose not to have any of the conveniences. So if you live without a cell phone and if you live without email, or I guess you get some kind of encrypted, private email or something like that. But I know, for example, cell phone transmissions can be intercepted because they're sort of radio. Yes. They're radio transmissions. Yes. So to some extent, if somebody got a cellular tap, I don't know if that would necessarily be legal, but from a technical point of view, they can listen in onto your calls.
That's true. And, due to the Patriot Act, they do listen in on calls when they have, if you're a person of interest or if they have reason to believe that you're committing terrorist acts. But believe me, there are people, ham radio operators that know how to do it, and hackers know how to do it. And there are people that specialize in intercepting information, and that's called competitive intelligence. It's called finding out information about your competitor to stay one step ahead of them. And that is probably the biggest threat that we are facing as Americans is our cybersecurity.
Well, absolutely. I know that one of the biggest threats is that foreign countries have entire units of people who are trying to hack into corporate databases to get all of the trade secrets, formulas, financial information, military, things like that. And that's a big problem because when you have sort of like an open access system, there's always, no matter how many firewalls you have, there's always some way to get in. And that's always
exactly
a problem.
That's exactly correct. Yeah. And believe it or not, there are some countries that have stepped up and have come up with, programs they would be called to protect their cyber infrastructure, because imagine China or North Korea or Iran getting into the Department of Immigration, for example. That's a very scary thought. So we have to do something about that.
All right. Well, that was the fastest hour of radio. So let's just catch before the next show starts. Let's rewrap the information. You were listening to Taking Care of Business. Today we were talking to Susan Nash, who is the author of Skip Tracing Basics and Beyond, a complete step-by-step guide for locating hidden assets. This is a brand new book. Get the second edition because the second edition just is twice as big and it just totally rocks. If you're a lawyer, you should definitely have this. If you're in the collections business and if you're a credit manager, you really need to have this on your shelf. In fact, I'm going to buy a few of these for some of my clients and have it on their shelves. If you want to talk to Susan, call her at 212-447-5913. Her email is susan@searchnetmgt.com, and of course her website is searchnetmgt.com. She's been doing this for a long time and very, very well. Her book is available at the usual places, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, in ebook form. And, I can't just say enough good things about what she does and her incredible resources and talent in what she does. So I guess that's it. I'll be seeing you all in a week. Thank you so much for listening. Again, TCB Radio, WCWP at yahoo.com. See you in a week, and thank you always for being there with us.